Amandla Stenberg stars in the new Netflix limited series, The Eddy, which comes from Damien Chazelle. I'm Kevin Jacobsen of Gold Derby, here to ask Amandla. You're playing Julie, the daughter of a owner of a jazz club in Paris. So how did you find your way into this character?
I was offered the role in a really lucky, fortuitous way. And I immediately connected to the character just because I kind of felt like I understood parts of her angst and parts of just kind of being a teenager and what that weird experience is like, trying to kind of define who you are, especially in the midst of really unstable circumstances. So I connected to her. She made me laugh. Thought she was funny. And yeah, it was kind of like a color that I had never had the opportunity to play before. So that was just really exciting to me. Like the idea of kind of leaning into parts of myself that maybe are not the most obviously protagonistic or likable even. Just like leaning into all the colors of adolescence and how you can kind of just be like an asshole sometimes. Yeah.
And obviously we have Damien Chazelle here as an executive producer and the director of the first two episodes. So with his involvement, was that something that made you become just more interested in the series? And also just what was it like just working with him as a director?
Yeah, I mean, definitely Damien's involvement was a big aspect of why the project intrigued me, just because I feel like Damien has such a fantastic sensibility for film and like cinema history. And when we first had like our first couple initial conversations around the project, I'd kind of asked him, 'cause I couldn't exactly glean immediately from reading the script. Like I couldn't wrap my head around the concept. I was like, so this is about a jazz club in Paris. It's contemporary, following all of these like disparate characters. Like, what's the point? Like, I was almost looking for this like overarching point. And after having a couple conversations with Damien, he kind of told me the place from which he would be directing the show, which was like very much inspired by French New Wave cinema, and kind of the realism of that strain of cinema. And that's like a part of cinema that I really love and have loved for a long time. And so it was so exciting to me, this concept of like following in the lineage of that history and creating something that didn't necessarily have like a really clear like beginning, middle, end, like no like plot device or narrative. I mean, even though like the writer has done a really beautiful job with that, but not to discredit that, but just the fact that the point of the show is not necessarily a clear cut, this is a story about a father and a daughter, this is a story about a jazz club. I think that the story is just about a human life, and you're kind of able to explore all the details and the minute details and facets of these different characters' lives, through the medium of French cinema, which like historically has kind of been mostly about leaning into what is real and what is genuine and authentic in the moment.
Right, and you genuinely, I think you do feel that influence very clearly just from the start. And I think, comparing it to La La Land, this is a lot less glossy and splashy, certainly. I think you really get the sense of grittiness and almost like a raw energy. So can you talk about just how it felt to be on set with that kind of a lived-in sort of atmosphere?
Sure. I had never shot anything in that manner before. It was, we were allowed so much freedom, especially in the first block, because we did block shooting. So, each block was like 2 episodes. So Damien directed the first couple episodes. We had so much freedom. Never done an interview in this way before, so I getting tripped up trying to understand where I'm speaking to or what I'm doing.
You're fine.
But anyways, so especially in the first block, Damien kind of set the precedent for how we were shooting, which was in a way that was really improvisational. Like he kind of wanted the medium of the story to kind of reflect the content of it. And so we were allowed like a lot of freedom for improv. We were told to lean into our instincts. We were told to kind of find new things in the moment, and just kind of like lean into whatever felt authentic or maybe unexpected. That was really cool because I never had that experience before. I was almost kind of like leaning into our intuitions, but then also like trying to see what happened when we went completely against our inclinations. Yeah, and the way that he worked with Eric, our DP, was so beautiful to witness. It was like true filmmaking to see like the way in which we would kind of stage scenes, and Eric, kind of like a dancer, would like figure out how to move the camera towards whatever was pulling him in the scene in that moment. And so much of it was improvisational. It was so cool to see.
And I know that you have a bit of a background in music, so I'm sure it was kind of fun to be in this kind of environment. But I'm curious about your relationship to jazz before this and just what you took away from this experience, just in that regard.
Yeah, sure. Well, I actually was named after a Miles Davis album. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I was given the name that I was given. It's the name of a Miles Davis album, and then the Miles Davis album has that title because of like the really deep significance of the word and its role in the anti-apartheid movement. But Miles Davis was really important to me growing up because it was so important to my mother, and I kind of like always like looked at jazz and like Miles. It's like very like irreverent presence because you know, it's named after it. And so I always had a connection to jazz, but definitely working on this project really changed the way that I think about it and kind of understand the medium of it. I think I feel so much more connected to the kind of the roots of jazz and like what its significance. With like hopefully in terms of like the connection that we kind of explore in the show between like Black American expats and coming to Paris and being a part of music and writing there and like, you know, coming there as a place of solace and like refuge. But also just I think I kind of understand like jazz in terms of the meaning of improv and the way that like the medium of that music kind of speaks to, I don't know, like you kind of have to speak from the depths of yourself in a very authentic and improvisational way. I think that's something I didn't really get about it before, but I got to be around all these like incredible jazz musicians every single day. It's like every day on set was like a live jazz performance. And it just like the energy of that just permeated the whole set, and it was really, really beautiful.
And so the Eddy is sort of structured in a way that one character sort of has the focus in each episode. And I think your big episode is number 2, and it involves Julie sort of getting lost in the streets of Paris. So can you just delve into a little bit of just Julie's mindset in these first few episodes as she's sort of adjusting to living in Paris with her father?
Sure. I think when we meet Julie, she's in an unstable place. I think kind of hopefully what you learn like throughout watching the series is that there's been a lot of past history that has led up to the moment in which we meet the characters, and that's really affected who they are and their relationships to each other. And so when we meet Julie, I think that she's in a really unstable part of her life, where she's attempting to understand who she is, but hasn't really been given the resources of the tools to really know that. And she kind of has to go on this journey where she puts herself in some pretty stupid situations in order to kind of be forced to finally reflect and confront who she is instead of kind of projecting out this bravado all the time.
And you share a good chunk of screen time on the show with Andre Holland, of course, who plays your father. And I actually talked to Andre the other day, and he mentioned that the two of you had watched some father-daughter movies together to really prepare for these roles and this relationship. So, I mean, what was that experience like from your angle?
Yeah, it was really cool. We were given a really incredible film list to watch before we went into filming. One of the movies that Andre and I watched was Amusement, which is like a very classic like French father-daughter movie. And I think some of the other movies were like Girlhood, Blue is the Warmest Color, The Class, which is another French. So they're all French movies that we like watched before going into filming. And but yeah, I think like French cinema is so different from American cinema. I think it was like really important for all of the directors, including like our second director, Huda Benimina. It was really important that we like gather the French sensibility, understand what we're going into like before we started filming, because I think at least I personally think it requires like a certain type of I don't know, like presence or like honesty that feels a little different from at least like much more, like mainstream American filmmaking.
Mm-hmm. And I noticed just in watching the series how the two of you really are able to suggest this sense of history in your relationship, and we don't get like flashbacks or anything, but I think we're still able to understand just how this relationship got to this point. So what are the things that you do as an actor to really convey that rich sense of history?
Oh, that's great to hear. Thank you. I do like a fair bit of like backstory work before I play a character, which is kind of like a kind of crazy thing to do because your backstory might be different from somebody else's backstory, and it's kind of wild to sit down there and just like create an imagined history for yourself, because you can really go anywhere and there's a lot of freedom in that. But there were certain things that Andre and I would agreed on, like a couple years ago this happened, and before that this happened, and like we had conversations with Damien where we would kind of go chronologically through like past history between the characters and kind of decide upon like the big facts that we would stick to. And so that was a conversation that we were having a lot of the time, was just talking about backstory, talking about where we are, what's happened previously to the moment that you meet these people. Yeah.
And so what about some other members of this cast? I mean, you got Joanna Kulig, who's great, Layla Bekti, Adil Debbie. I mean, you have a lot of great one-on-one scenes with each of them, but it's a really strong ensemble. And I wonder if you found just any part of developing those relationships with them to be a challenge or rewarding, or what was that like?
Yeah, I think it was challenging in the sense that like Layla, for instance, like comes from like such a different background of acting, and sometimes it was like intimidating to be around her because it felt so like naturalistic and like grounded in a way that like I inspired to be on that wavelength with her. But everyone is so talented. Everyone is so inspiring. Every single player and every single person who was a part of the cast like brought something that was so special. Some of the main characters on the show are first-time actors. Some of them are musicians primarily, and you kind of get to see that later in the series. But yeah, our jazz musicians in particular, like they had never really acted before, and they brought something that was like so grounded and real because, you know, they were kind of speaking truth to their own experiences. So every single person was really inspiring. Joanna was balancing so much in the process of filming because she had to sing in English, and she had to speak French, and she also had just had a baby, and she had to like be a full-time jazz performer like for the first time in her life. Like she was juggling so many things, and like English is not her first language. She has to do that. Like it was wild to like witness her come onto the set and like have all of these responsibilities that she had to take care of and just like handle them. Yeah.
Well, as we wrap up here, I wanted to go back to a few years ago, actually, because I remember you had a really great year with The Hate You Give, very great, underrated film. And then you would actually be invited to present at the Oscars with Representative John Lewis, the great civil rights leader. So can you just tell us what that experience was like for you?
Oh, man. Yeah, that felt like just the greatest gift and honor ever. and like to be invited onto that stage and like have the opportunity for it to be filtered through that lens and like given that meaning was so deeply gratifying and just such an honor. Because I mean, don't get me wrong, like I take the Oscars seriously, like as seriously as most actors do probably, but it is like all of us getting into a room and clapping for each other. And so like to be able to utilize that platform with him in that moment is so special, and I feel so grateful that I was able to even meet him in that moment, you know.
Yeah, it was a beautiful moment for sure. And I want to thank you so much, Amandla, for talking to us today. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
And for those of you watching, hit like and subscribe for more Emmy season interviews, and head over to goldderby.com to make your own predictions.